Lord, I came across the song this week in my, whatever you want to call it, getting ready for this. And it was written by a Hoosier named John Mellencamp. It's called the Authority Song. And there's a great, in that song, there's a great verse that's just, it's amazing how sometimes the secular world can say it better than the preachers in us time. But in that song, the second verse, it goes, "So I call up my preacher, and I say, give me strength for round 5. He said, you don't need no strength, you need to grow up, son. And I said, growing up leads to growing old and then to dying. And dying to me don't sound like all that much fun. So I said, I fight authority, and authority always wins. Well, in a sense, that's what happened with our walk with Jesus. What Jesus says, like the things, you don't need no strength, you need to grow up. That's with us too. We don't need more strength, we need to grow up into the image of Christ, because all the strength comes from the power of God. That's why Paul, when I'm weak, I'm strong. That whole thing. Because Christ, God's power, the power is made perfect in weakness. But what's interesting, he says, growing up leads to growing old and then to dying. Well, growing up in the Lord leads to dying to self, doesn't it? That don't sound like all that much fun. Does it? Doesn't for me. It says, you don't need no strength, you need to grow up, son. That's what he said. And he says, when I fight authority, authority always wins. Believe it or not, when we, us, you, me, fight Jesus, Jesus' authority, his ways, his authority always wins. Always. Now, we may work in our might and scurry and have some little human accomplishments, but strictly in our human might. I often hear folks within the church, and I'm not necessarily saying here, but when I say church at large, talk about how much they do. Have you ever noticed when Jesus talked? He didn't talk that much about what he does. The Father does this, I see the Father doing that, I see the Father doing this, the Father's doing this, the Spirit's moving here. There's not much about, I did this because I'm Jesus. Do you? I mean, it's just, read it. And as I said, I often hear folks saying how much they do. But I don't hear a whole lot of what God's doing through us. We can throw God out the window and accomplish the same thing without God. Most of the time. Can't we? Several years ago, I read a book by Lee Iacocca back when he was when I went to college. And he talks in this book about people in the workplace or upper management that would always talk about, I'm putting in an 80-hour week. I'm putting in an 80-hour week. And Iacocca just said that didn't impress him at all. He said what he was impressed by was the guy that could do that in 40 hours. He said the idea of working harder didn't do anything. He says, I want to find something that works smarter. Isn't that what Jesus is doing, kind of working smarter? When he says, I only do what the Father's doing. Isn't it? You're already back in the corner. I mean, you can't get in any tighter. You see, he said he wasn't impressed. He was really impressed by the guy who could get it done in 40 to 50 hours. That's a sign that the person's getting it. Those are the ones that he wanted in upper management or leadership, the gifted ones. The ones that grasp this idea of working smarter. They didn't, the good ones don't work harder, they work smarter. Anybody that would go up and try to empty a swimming pool with a teacup would say, the moron. The fact that they spent, 3 years emptying their swimming pool with a teacup, we wouldn't look at that as being anything to be particularly proud of, would we? We'd say, go get the pump. And doing things all of ourselves is not something necessarily to be proud of. But I fear sometimes we do it all ourselves because we get little pats on the back and we feel good about ourselves. See, that's what Jesus is talking about here, in a sense, when he's saying, I only do what I see the Father doing. He isn't working harder, he's working smarter, isn't he? Have we begun to work smarter? Do we work smarter? Or do we do it the hard way? You know, there's a saying, you hear people in the military, there's the right way, the wrong way, the easy way, the hard way, the Marine way. How can you tell if what we're doing is our own might, or we're working harder rather than working smarter? And one of the things I've always found is take your foot off the accelerator. See what happens. That's like one of the things I've said when I came here is, well, 2 things I will not do. I kind of did. I don't want to preach about giving. I don't want to preach about attendance. You follow up? I want to be born of God. Now, I could go and call on people every, I look at the roll who shows up and call people on Tuesday, where were you at? And pester the snot out. I'm not probably getting here. But as soon as I get off the phone and get off the accelerator, guess what happens? I think working smarter is getting something stirred in people, getting something stirred in their hearts where they want to be here. Get God involved in the process. So as I said, doing things, working harder is not necessarily a sign of a Christian maturity or being in a mature place. You see, doing the way we did things in the world may actually be a very mature understanding of our walk with God. As we read our text, spiritual maturity, I believe, leads to a total dependence on God. That as we are maturing, the things that we're clinging on to are less and less the things of this world and more the things of God. You know, Mark Twain is somebody I really like, and like I talk about being able to say a lot with a few words. Mark Twain had a statement attributed to him. And it goes, and I'll read it. He says, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished how much he'd learned in 7 years." Now, was that experience laughing? And what happens is a sign of immaturity is when we think we know it all, isn't it? You ever